A mortal woman accidentally trades her shadow for safe passage and learns it's the mark of his betrothed. I sold my shadow for safe passage, it bound me to the Fae Prince. The mist rolled over the moors like breath from another world, curling between the standing stones and whispering secrets to anyone foolish enough to linger. Rissa had never meant to wander this far. She'd only wanted to escape the storm. But storms in the borderlands between the human realm and fairy were unpredictable things. They chased you when you ran and swallowed you when you hid. The first thing she noticed when she stumbled through the last curtain of fog was the silence. No rain, no wind. The second was the light. It came from nowhere and everywhere, soft silver that glowed from the moss, the trees, even the air itself. Her heart pounded as she turned in slow circles. The moor had melted into something older, stranger. The sky shimmered with colors she had no name for. Lost, little mortal? The voice was smooth as glass and twice as dangerous. Rissa spun, her boot catching on a root. A man, no, not a man, stood beneath an oak that gleamed like bronze. His hair was moonlight, his eyes a storm breaking over a mountain range, and when he smiled, the air seemed to sigh. I didn't mean to cross over, she said quickly, holding her satchel close. The storm. He lifted a hand and the word died on her tongue. Storms obey my kind. You crossed because the veil allowed it. Which means it wants something from you. She swallowed hard. And what would that be? He stepped closer, and the air thrummed around him like music. Perhaps nothing. Perhaps everything. What I want, however, is simpler. His gaze flicked down. Your shadow. Rissa followed his eyes and gasped. The ground beneath her was silver moss, and her shadow, the ordinary, black outline of herself, shivered as if alive. My shadow? Why would you? He smiled again, all teeth and danger. Because here, it's the mark of a bond. And I find myself intrigued. The deal was made before she quite understood it. She only remembered the moment his fingers brushed her wrist, warm, electric, and the shimmer of her shadow stretching, thinning, then flowing toward his feet like spilled ink. When it was gone, she felt strangely lighter. Empty, but not afraid. He offered his hand. Safe passage, as promised. You said you wanted my shadow, not my soul. Ah, Trevan said with a grin, that depends on how you define one. The path through his realm wound like a dream. Trees with glass leaves chimed softly as they passed. Rivers sang in languages she almost recognized. When she looked down, her feet left no mark. Without her shadow, she didn't quite feel real. You'll fade, you know, said a voice behind her. Rissa turned to see a Fae woman with wings like frost-laced glass. She was beautiful in the way knives are beautiful. Fade? You gave him your shadow. It's the mark of the bound. He can see your every move, call you with a word, bend your will if he wishes. You're his betrothed now. Rissa's pulse stuttered. That's not possible. I didn't agree to that. The Fae woman's laugh was soft and cruel. You don't agree with a Fae prince, mortal. You comply. When Trevan returned, Rissa was sitting by a river that shimmered like mercury, her reflection faint, incomplete. You tricked me, she said. I offered a bargain. You didn't tell me what it meant. He crouched beside her, his gaze unreadable. You didn't ask. Then take it back, she said, standing. Undo it. I can't, he said quietly. Not without undoing you. Her breath caught. Then what am I supposed to do? Stay, he said simply. Learn what you've become. The days that followed were unlike anything Rissa had known. The palace of Lightningdale was a labyrinth of crystal halls and living light. Fae courtiers watched her with curious disdain, whispering behind lace fans. Every corner hummed with enchantments, roses that sang, mirrors that remembered your face, doors that sighed your name when you walked by. Trevan visited her often. Sometimes he brought her gifts, an opal comb that shimmered with her missing shadow, a vial of night sky she could pour into her palm. Sometimes he brought nothing but conversation. "Why me?" she asked him once. "There are countless Fae women who would give anything to be your betrothed." He smiled faintly. "Exactly. They would give anything. You gave something without knowing its worth. That kind of innocence is rare here." "Innocence," she echoed. "You stole part of me." "I claimed what you offered," he said, though his eyes softened. "And I didn't expect it to matter." "Does it?" Trevan hesitated. "More than it should." When the moon turned twice, the court prepared for the binding festival, a ceremony to seal his betrothal before the entire realm. Rissa watched the preparations from her chamber window, lanterns filled with captive lightning, banners woven from light itself. She wasn't invited. That night, she crept into the Hall of Shadows. It was forbidden, a place where every Fae kept their truest self locked away from mortal eyes. What she found there made her blood run cold. Her shadow was there, alive, moving. It danced across a wall of glass, mimicking her every memory. Every time she laughed, cried, or dreamed, the shadow had recorded it. And Trevan stood before it, his hand pressed against the glass. "Why?" she whispered. He didn't turn. "Because it's beautiful. Because it's yours. Because I thought I could keep it without hurting you." Her voice broke. "Then let it go." "I can't," he said. "If I do, you'll return to your world, and forget this place, forget me. Maybe that's mercy." He turned then, anguish flickering across his perfect features. "Do you truly wish to forget?" Rissa looked at her shadow, reaching toward her like a living thing. She thought of the mortal world, mud, storms, hunger. And she thought of him, danger and wonder all bound together. "I don't know," she said honestly. The binding festival dawned bright as fire. Trevan stood before the court, a crown of lightning in his hair. Rissa was summoned, dressed in silver threads that shimmered like water. The High Seer lifted a blade of starlight. "Do you, Trevan Lightningdale, bind your heart to the one whose shadow you hold?" Trevan's eyes met hers. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then, softly, he said, "No." The court gasped. The seer froze. Trevan turned to Rissa. "You deserve to choose. A true bond can't be stolen." He snapped his fingers, and the glass walls of the Hall of Shadows shattered. Her shadow rushed toward her, wrapping her in darkness and light. Pain seared through her, but beneath it, something else bloomed, wholeness. When she opened her eyes, she stood on the mortal moor once more. The storm had passed. The sky was gold with dawn. For a heartbeat, she thought she was alone. Then the air shimmered, and Trevan appeared beside her, barefoot in the grass. "You came through," she whispered. "I left my crown behind," he said with a wry smile. "Seems fair. You returned my shadow to me." "I didn't." He touched her cheek, his voice low. "You did. I was only ever half alive until you made me remember what love costs." Rissa looked down. Her shadow lay long beside his, two shapes touching. "Then what happens now?" she asked. Trevan's smile was slow, real. "Now we find out what it means to share the same light." The wind swept across the moor again, carrying the scent of wildflowers and something older, electric. Somewhere beyond the veil, the Fae realm mourned the loss of its prince. Here, under a mortal sun, a woman and a man who was no longer quite Fae walked hand in hand, their shadows intertwined, proof that some bargains are worth keeping. The moor was quiet when the last shimmer of magic faded, but the silence felt wrong, too still, as though the world was waiting to see whether it would accept him. Trevan knelt, pressing his palm to the earth. The soil hissed faintly under his touch, steam curling up like a sigh. "It doesn't want me," he murmured. Rissa wrapped her cloak tighter against the dawn chill. "The mortal realm?" He gave a small, humorless laugh. The ground knows what I am. It remembers. You're not just Fae anymore, she said, stepping closer. You crossed over. You left your crown. You left all that power behind. He lifted his eyes to hers. And yet it follows me. Lightning flickered faintly in his irises, a last echo of the realm he'd ruled. For a moment she saw what the Fae had feared, a being born of thunder and stormlight, untamed and unrelenting. But then his expression softened, the storm fading into something uncertain, human, almost. Rissa reached for his hand. Let's start small, she said. Food. Shelter. The rest can wait. They walked until the moor gave way to forest, and the forest to a small village that looked as though it had fallen asleep a century ago. Smoke curled from crooked chimneys. Laundry flapped like ghosts on a line. When they entered, the few people they passed gave polite nods to Rissa, and long, uneasy stares to the man beside her. Trevan didn't seem to notice, but she could feel the tension ripple through him like a current. Every clanging door, every barking dog drew his gaze. He was too alert, too graceful, as though every sound might be a threat. This way, she said softly, tugging him down a side lane toward her small cottage near the edge of the village. She'd left it weeks ago to trade at market and hadn't expected to return so soon, or in such company. When she opened the door, dust motes danced in the light like tiny spirits. It's not much, she said, embarrassed suddenly by the simplicity of it, the stone hearth, the threadbare rug, the single bed. Trevan stepped inside, ducking under the low lintel. He ran a finger along a shelf, studying a row of clay mugs as though they were relics. It's warm, he said. It smells like you. She froze halfway through setting down her satchel. What does that even mean? Rain and rosemary, he said with absolute seriousness. And something that doesn't exist in fairy anymore. Realness. Rissa tried not to smile. You talk like a poet and a thief had a child. He turned to her with that same infuriating half-grin. You gave me your shadow. I had to make sure I was worth stealing from. That first night, they barely slept. Trevan lay on the floor by the hearth, watching the flames as though they might speak. Rissa sat on the bed, staring at her hands. They had been warm once, glowing faintly with Fae energy after he'd touched her, but now they were just hands again. What will they do? She asked finally. Your people. When they realize you're gone. They'll come for me, he said simply. And for you. Her stomach twisted. They can't cross the veil. He looked at her. Not easily. But power leaks through cracks. Especially when hearts are involved. She lay back, staring at the ceiling. So this is temporary. I don't know, he said. No one has done this before. When she glanced down at him, his eyes were half closed, the light from the fire painting gold across his cheekbones. He looked exhausted. Mortal. Sleep, she whispered. For once, let something happen without you controlling it. He didn't answer, but his breathing deepened. Outside, the wind rose and the first drops of rain began to fall. The next morning, Rissa woke to find him gone. Panic surged through her chest, but before she could call his name, the door creaked open. Trevan stepped inside, drenched, a bundle of wildflowers and dew-glazed apples in his arms. You left, she said, trying to sound more annoyed than relieved. I explored, he said simply. There's a brook nearby. And your neighbors gossip loudly. Her eyes narrowed. What did they say? That you were seen walking with a ghost. A lightning spirit. Some even think I'm your dead lover come to drag you to the underworld. She snorted despite herself. That's not far off. He set the flowers on the table. They also said you've been alone too long. Rissa froze. Did they? Trevan's tone softened. Are they right? Maybe, she said after a moment. But I wasn't lonely. He studied her face, as if weighing the truth of that. And now? She swallowed. Now I'm not sure what I am. Days passed. Trevan learned to build fires, to walk without making the world hum beneath his feet, to eat mortal food without wincing at the blandness of it. He laughed more, though sometimes it came out surprised, as if he'd forgotten what laughter sounded like. And Rissa, she began to dream again. Her shadow stayed close now, moving like a living thing, sometimes stretching toward him when he entered the room. She pretended not to notice. But peace never lasts in stories like these. It began one night when the mirror above her washbasin rippled like water. The reflection darkened, and a woman's face appeared, sharp, cold, and painfully beautiful. Rissa of the mortal realm, the voice said, echoing through her bones. You harbor what is ours. Rissa backed away, heart hammering. Trevan left of his own will. The reflection smiled without warmth. Princes do not leave. They are reclaimed. Before Rissa could reply, the mirror shattered, and she felt something cold press against her mind, a whisper not her own. He belongs to the storm. You will burn for his theft. She gasped, stumbling back. The air stank of ozone. Trevan burst into the room, lightning flickering at his fingertips. I felt it, he said, voice low. They found us. They fled before dawn. Through the moors, past the rivers, deeper into the mortal wilderness where even Fae magic struggled to reach. The storm followed, thunder rolling across the horizon like war drums. Where are we going? She shouted over the wind. To the standing stones, he said. There's a crossing there that's old, half closed. I can seal it completely, from both sides. But that means I'll never go back, he said. And if they breach it, neither will you. Rissa's chest ached. You trap yourself here? Forever? He gave her a sidelong look, rain streaming down his face. Forever is a small price for freedom. Lightning split the sky, striking the path ahead. Shadows moved within the light, tall, slender figures, eyes like burning silver. Fae knights. Trevan grabbed her hand. Stay behind me. The air roared as power collided. His lightning against their glamour. Sparks burned through the rain. Rissa saw flashes of armor, glimpses of faces twisted with sorrow and rage. Trevan Lightningdale, one of them shouted. By order of the High Court, return or be unmade. Trevan raised his hand, eyes blazing. Then unmake me. The blast that followed lit the moor like daylight. Rissa was thrown to the ground. When she looked up, Trevan stood surrounded by a halo of stormlight, his power ripping through the veil itself. And yet, for all his fury, he was bleeding. Stop! Rissa screamed, running forward. She seized his hand, ignoring the burn of magic. There's another way. There isn't, he gasped. They'll keep coming. Then let me help. He turned to her, thunder rumbling in his chest. You can't. You're mortal? Then make me something else. The knights hesitated, whispering among themselves. No mortal had ever spoken such words at a Fae prince's side. Trevan looked at her, torn between despair and awe. You don't know what you're asking. I know what I want, she said, voice shaking. I want to choose this time. He hesitated only a breath longer, then pressed his palm against her chest. Then share my shadow. The world exploded into light. When she opened her eyes, the storm had gone silent. The nights had vanished. The air shimmered faintly, like the moment before dawn. Trevan knelt beside her, his expression unreadable. What happened? She whispered. He reached out, brushing her cheek. You're half of me now. Mortal and Fae both. Rissa looked down, and saw it, her shadow and his, fused together, two outlines interwoven, moving in perfect unison. She felt power pulsing under her skin, but also warmth, human warmth, alive and fierce. So we sealed it? She asked. He nodded. No one crosses again. Not Fae, not mortal. She smiled faintly. Then we'll have to make our own world. Trevan's answering smile was quiet and full of wonder. Together. They rebuilt her cottage first, though it was more theirs than hers now. He carved the walls with faint sigils to keep the world balanced between their natures. She planted gardens that bloomed in both daylight and starlight. Sometimes, she caught him standing outside at night, head tilted toward the sky. "Do you miss it?" she asked. "The court?" He shook his head. "No. But I miss the sound of storms that obeyed me." She reached for his hand. "They still do. You just have to ask nicely now." He laughed, that rare, unguarded sound that made her heart ache. Seasons passed. The villagers grew used to the strange couple on the edge of the woods, the man who could call rain for the crops and the woman whose shadow sometimes moved on its own. Some whispered they were blessed. Others, that they were cursed. Neither cared. Because sometimes, when twilight deepened and the veil shimmered faintly at the edge of sight, Rissa would feel a pulse of light against her skin, the heartbeat of another world that had once claimed them both. And Trevan would smile, tracing the curve of her jaw, whispering, "Still ours. Always ours." And beneath their feet, two shadows moved together, neither quite human nor fae, just one story, written in lightning and love. The first sign came with the crows. They arrived one gray morning in a restless, swirling cloud, blotting out the sky over the cottage. Rissa stood at the doorway, hands shading her eyes, as hundreds of black wings cut jagged shapes against the light. "Those aren't normal," she muttered. Trevan came to stand beside her, drying his hands on a cloth. He took one look at the flock and his jaw tightened. "No," he said quietly. "They're borrowed bodies." The crows wheeled once more, then descended as one, streaming toward the old oak at the edge of the clearing. They landed, rustling and shifting, until the branches bent under the weight. For a heartbeat nothing moved. Then the birds began to melt. Feathers flowed like tar. Wings folded in on themselves. A tall shape unfolded from the mass, dripping shadows that evaporated as they hit the grass. The figure that stepped forward wore a cloak of night and a crown of tiny, chittering skulls. Rissa's fingers found Trevan's without thinking. "Prince Lightningdale," the stranger said, voice echoing as if spoken down a well. "Or should I say, exile?" Trevan's grip on her hand tightened. "You're far from the court, Kale." Rissa blinked. Kale was beautiful in the way winter is beautiful, sharp, clean, and lethal. Pale hair braided with bones, eyes like polished obsidian, no whites, no pupils. A shadow court emissary. She recognized the stories. The emissary's gaze slid to Rissa. "And this must be the mortal who wears your shadow." Rissa straightened. "Rissa. I have my own shadow, thanks. We share, we don't, wear each other." Kale's lips twitched. Spoken like someone who has no idea what she's become. Trevan took a step forward. The air darkened around him. "State your purpose." The emissary inclined his head, mock courteous. "I bring an offer from the High Court. The seal you tore at the Standing Stones is imperfect. It holds, for now, but it fractures around the edges. Power bleeds. If left as it is, both realms will unravel at the seam." Rissa's stomach dropped. "Unravel how?" "Storms that never end. Crops that will not grow. Children born with no shadow at all." Kale's gaze was dispassionate, like a physician describing a disease. "Your romantic gesture, as charming as it is, has consequences." Trevan's shoulders stiffened. "I knew it would strain the old crossings." "You ruptured a law older than your bloodline," Kale said. "Did you think you'd live in your little cottage, tending flowers and playing at mortality, and the worlds would politely rearrange themselves around you?" Rissa's cheeks burned. Shame tried to rise, but anger shoved it aside. "We didn't ask to be dragged into your politics. You stole my shadow first." Kale's head tilted. And now you wear half a prince's soul. You're not an innocent bystander, mortal. Trevan stepped slightly in front of her. Get to the offer. Simple, Kale said. Come back. No, Trevan said. Kale smiled faintly. You misunderstand me. Come back as what you are now. Half fae, half mortal, with your little shadow bond intact. The court will name you king between. Your joined natures will stabilize the tear, two worlds anchored through you. Rissa's breath caught. King. Between? Trevan's expression didn't change, but the air around him did. It stirred, tasting like thunder. You'd make me a tether. We'd make you sovereign, Kale said. The first of your kind. Your mortal lives in comfort in the palace, her family elevated, her name sung. You get your storms back. She gets eternity. Rissa flinched at the word. Eternity sounded less like a promise and more like a sentence. And if we refuse? She asked. Kale's smile vanished. Then the seal crumbles. The realms bleed into each other uncontrolled. We send soldiers instead of envoys. You are unmade, Trevan. The mortal is claimed by the rift. Both worlds suffer. The emissary looked at Trevan again. But hey, at least you had a few lovely seasons in your mud hut. Trevan's power spiked, a flash of ozone. Rissa squeezed his hand hard. Don't, she said under her breath. We're not doing this in the yard. Kale watched, amused. You have one full moon cycle, he said. To decide. I'll return when the moon is high over the standing stones. Come with me, or don't come at all. The crows exploded outward, his body dissolving back into a rain of feathers and shrieks. In seconds, the emissary was gone. Only a few black plumes remained on the grass. Rissa's heart hammered against her ribs. Tell me that was a bluff. Trevan stared at the empty air, jaw clenched. Shadow Court doesn't bluff. They calculate. Then they're right, she demanded. The seal's failing? He turned to her, stormlight flickering faintly in his eyes. Balance was never meant to be forced. We ripped the door off its hinges and nailed it shut with our bare hands. It will hold for a while. Not forever. Panic tried to climb her throat. Rissa shoved it down. So we fix it without crawling back to them. Trevan gave a short, humorless laugh. Spoken like someone who's never seen what happens when realms collide. Then show me, she snapped. Stop protecting me with ignorance. That pulled his gaze to hers fully. For the first time since he'd crossed over, he looked uncertain. Not about the magic, but about her. You're mortal, he said softly. Half, she shot back. The other half is the idiot who tore a hole between worlds to love me. We did this together. We fix it together. Or we fall apart trying. Something in his face broke, then reformed, sharper and truer. He reached up, thumb brushing her cheekbone. Lightning loves the tallest tree, he murmured. Even if it splits it. And the tree still grows, she said. Just in a new direction. He huffed a breath that might have been a laugh. Fine. You want to see? We go to the tear. They left the next morning at dawn. Rissa packed bread, dried meat, and the small knife her mother had given her when she first traveled alone to market. Trevan took nothing but his coat and a strip of chalk, white as bone. What's that for? She asked as they locked the cottage door behind them. It felt wrong, locking it. As if they wouldn't see it again. Lines, he said. Maps. Containment. He tucked the chalk into an inner pocket. Trust me, you don't want me drawing with blood unless we're out of options. The path to the standing stones had not changed, but the world around it had. Colors bled at the edges, slightly too vivid or slightly wrong. Shadows didn't always match the objects that cast them. Once, Rissa saw a stone cast the shape of a woman kneeling, though there was no one there. Is that, she began. Yes, Trevan said quietly. The tear is affecting echoes. Ghosts, memories, pieces of selves that should have stayed on their side. Is that what they mean by children born with no shadow? She asked. He nodded. A shadow is more than darkness. It's proof you exist in both light and absence. When the realms go wrong, so does that balance. She glanced down. Their merged shadow stretched ahead of them on the path, fused at the hand where their fingers laced together. It made something fierce rise in her chest. This was theirs. They'd fought for it. She wasn't giving it up to any court, mortal or fae. By midday, the stones rose before them, a circle of monoliths older than any map. The air hummed around them like a plucked string, vibrating in Rissa's bones. Light snagged on the edges of the stones, bending slightly, as if reluctant to pass. Trevan let go of her hand and walked to the center of the circle. Lightning crackled faintly along his fingertips. Feel that? He asked. Rissa stepped in after him. The world shifted. Just a fraction, just enough. It felt like standing on the skin of a drum while someone tapped it softly from below. Yes, she whispered. That's the seam, he said. You and I are the nail holding it closed. He exhaled slowly. Kale's offer is to turn us into a lock instead. She frowned. Is there a difference? Locks can be opened, he said. Keys can be stolen. Anchors can drown. He closed his eyes and sank to one knee, pressing his palm to the ground. The hum intensified. Around them, the stones flickered. One moment solid, the next translucent, showing glimpses of a wilder sky and impossible constellations. The Fae realm, pressing close. Rissa took a breath and did the strangest thing she'd ever done in her life. She knelt as well and pressed her hand to the opposite side of the seam. The world punched through her. For a heartbeat, she saw everything. 2 skies, 2 suns, 2 versions of herself. Mortal Rissa, with mud on her boots and a knife in her belt. Shadow Rissa, wreathed in Fae light, eyes like burning silver. Between them, a line of lightning in the shape of Trevan's hand. She gasped, ripping her hand back, falling onto her heels. Her heart pounded wild and terrified. Trevan's eyes snapped open. What did you do? Her voice shook. I touched it. Like you. You're not trained, he hissed. You could have. Exploded, she cut in. Gotten unmade? Join the list of things I should have died from already. She swallowed, forcing the shaking out of her limbs. But I saw something. He waited, hard-eyed and silent. 2 of me, she said. 2 of us. On both sides. The seam is trying to split us along the line. Make one Rissa here, one there. One Trevan mortal, one Trevan Fae. He closed his eyes again, an old, weary pain crossing his face. Of course it is. The realms loathe mixed states. They always resolve. Like water and oil, she said quietly. They don't mix, he agreed. Unless you bind them with something else. An egg, a hand, a will. Then we bind harder, she said. He opened his eyes. Rissa. No, she cut in. Listen. Kale wants us as their hinge because we're already half of both. But that doesn't have to mean going back. If the seam is trying to split us, then the only way it wins is if we let it separate what we are together. So we don't. We double down. Confusion flickered across his face, then reluctant curiosity. Double down how? She swallowed, heart hammering. You said once my shadow marked me as your betrothed in fairy, whether I agreed or not. He nodded slowly. A shadow claim is a betrothal mark. A promise of binding. I broke the customs when I refused the ceremony. Then we finish it, she said. On our terms. Here, between. Not their version that chains me to a court, but one that seals us to each other so deeply the seam can't peel us apart. He stared at her. Really stared at her, like he hadn't since the day she'd stepped out of the mist. You're proposing a binding ritual without a circle. Without a seer. Without witnesses. Do you know what happens if we get it wrong? Yes, she said. The same thing that happens if we do nothing. We break. The worlds break with us. She took a breath. I'd rather fail trying to fix what we caused than sit safely in the cottage while your people turn you into a chain. Silence stretched, full and bright. Lightning flickered along his jawline, the old power stirring. You terrify me, he said softly. Likewise, she said. Doesn't mean I'm wrong. Slowly, a smile curved his mouth. Not the charming court smile. The real one, crooked and a little wild. It might, he said. But God's help me, I'd rather follow you into a broken ritual than Kale into a throne room. He stood, offering her his hand. Say the words, then. She blinked. What words? The binding is intention, he said. The words are yours. No witnesses, no seer, no carved starlight blade. Just two fools in a circle of ancient rock with a crack in reality under their feet. Rissa exhaled slowly, feeling the weight of what she was about to do. The world hummed like a held breath. She took his hand. Trevan Lightningdale, she said, voice steadier than she felt. You stole my shadow and gave me back more than you took. You pulled me into your storms. You walked willingly into my mud. I bind my light to yours. My fear, my anger, my hope, my ugly truths and my better ones. Lightning crackled gently where their fingers met. Trevan's eyes darkened, pupils blown wide. Rissa of the mortal realm, he murmured, who walked into Fairy without knowing the cost and demanded the bill in full. You dragged me from my throne and taught me what it is to be small and still whole. I bind my storm to your earth. My power, my weakness, my past, and whatever future we manage not to destroy. Their joined shadow flared, edges burning silver. Rissa took a shuddering breath. We bind not to a court or a crown, but to each other. Not as lock or chain or hinge, but as spine. The thing that lets two halves stand upright. The seam doesn't own us. We define it. Trevan's lips parted in a brief, stunned laugh. Spine. You are definitely not speaking the language of the High Court. Good, she said. They bore me. He squeezed her hands. Then say it with me. Together, they spoke, voices overlapping, the words ancient and brand new all at once. Where our shadows touch, no realm may part them. Where our light meets, there is home. Let the seam bend around us, not through us. Let our joined selves be the pattern the worlds remember. The ground shook. The standing stones flared, each one blazing with a vertical river of light. The hum rose to a roar, vibrating through teeth and bone. Rissa's vision blurred. She felt their shared shadow stretch, thin, and then stab downward like a root into the crack between worlds. It hurt. Not like being burned, not like being cut. More like every story she'd told herself about who she was being peeled back and rewritten in real time. Mortal. Half Fae. Betrothed by theft. Chosen by choice. All overlapping, no one version allowed to exist alone. Trevan yelled something, her name, she thought, but his voice came from everywhere, not just in front of her. The seam screamed. Light inverted. Dark became bright, bright became dark. Rissa saw Fairy on one side, wild and beautiful and mad, the mortal world on the other, fragile and stubborn and fleeting. And between them a third thing. A narrow, liminal corridor that had never quite existed until now. They were standing in it. Between, she whispered. Trevan turned his head, and she saw that his eyes now held not just stormlight but flecks of human brown, like fertile soil struck by lightning. This is what Kale wanted, he said hoarsely. A between place. A permanent corridor. A controlled crossing. But they wanted it anchored to their rules, she said, realization dawning. To their crown. Not to our choice. The corridor shuddered around them, raw and unfinished. Ahead, Rissa could see the faint outline of doors, one toward Fairy, one toward the mortal moors. Can we steer it? She asked. Shape how it works? Trevan's mouth twisted. We can try. We're its spine, remember? But anything we build here will stand long after we're gone. This corridor will define how our worlds meet. Trade. Visit. Fight. Or don't, she said. We can build in locks. Toll gates. Terms. He stared at her, a kind of fierce pride burning through the exhaustion. You really are thinking like a ruler. I'm thinking like someone who doesn't want Kale deciding what my grandchildren see when they look at the horizon, she snapped. His smile was quick and bright. Then we decide. He reached into his coat and pulled out the chalk. Its pale surface glowed brighter in this between place, like bone under moonlight. Lines, he said. Maps. Containment. Together, they walked the corridor. Every step felt like writing in wet cement. Rissa spoke rules as he scratched sigils into the not-quite ground. No crossings without mutual consent, she said. The chalk flared. No army may pass unless invited from both sides, he added. The air shivered. No stealing children, shadows, or souls, she said fiercely. No glamour binding mortals without clear cost given and agreed. That one will infuriate the court, he said, amused, as the sigil burned itself deep. Good, she said. They walked and rode and bound until the corridor felt less like a wound and more like a scar, healed, but never fully forgotten. A reminder. A warning. A possibility. Finally, when Rissa thought her legs would give out, they reached the point where the corridor narrowed to a single thread. Ahead, the mortal moor shivered into view. She turned. Behind them, Fairy hung like a second sky. She could see the faint line of a palace, stormlight flickering over distant towers. And, just for a second, a cluster of figures at the edge of the realm. Watching. Kale. His face was too far to read, but she swore she felt the weight of his stare. Not victorious. Calculating. I don't like that, she muttered. He'll be back, Trevan said quietly. They all will. The court has lost their absolute control, not their ambition. But now they have to use the door we built, she said. Not rip holes wherever they want. He nodded slowly. And they'll have to negotiate. With mortals. With you. The thought was both terrifying and strangely right. Rissa reached for his hand again. Let's go home, she said. Before I start writing more rules and accidentally outlaw tea. He squeezed her fingers. There are worse tyrannies. They stepped through. The moor rushed up to meet them, green and wet and real. Behind them, the standing stones glowed faintly, each one now etched with new lines of sigils that hadn't been there before. Rissa could feel the corridor humming beneath them like a sleeping beast. Did we fix it? She asked, voice soft. Trevan looked at the sky. The colors were normal again, no bleed, no wrongness. Shadows on the stones matched stones. The wind smelled like rain, not rift. For now, he said. The seam is stable. The corridor is anchored. We bought the world's time, and we gave them a way to meet that doesn't depend on one court's whims. Rissa exhaled. And Kale? Will come trying to use it, Trevan said. But he'll have to knock. Good, she repeated, more to herself than to him. They started back toward the cottage, every step heavier with the bone-tiredness of magic burned and rewoven. Their joined shadow stretched ahead of them, unremarkable again, two shapes holding hands. After a while, Trevan said quietly, you realized, back there, that what you proposed was a marriage. Rissa stumbled. Yes, she said. Kind of hard to miss. Not a court marriage, he said. Not a human one either. Something that binds on both sides. Until death, or until the corridor crumbles. She swallowed. Do you regret it? He stopped walking. Rissa turned, heart thudding too loud. He was watching her, face open in a way she'd never seen in the palace, or on the moors, or even in the cottage with its warm fires and soft mornings. I had been betrothed since before I was born, he said. To power, to duty, to expectation. None of those claims ever asked me what I wanted. You did. You demanded it. You demanded that we fix what we broke or go down trying. His voice roughened. If I regret anything, it's that I didn't meet you sooner, so I could have told them all to go to hell a long time ago. Her throat tightened. Trevan. He stepped closer, hands cupping her face, thumbs gentle just in front of her ears. Lightning hummed faintly under his skin. I don't regret binding myself to you. I regret every moment before I knew it was possible. Rissa felt something unclench inside her chest that had been tightened for years, since long before fairy, before shadows and storms. A knot of always being less, of never being chosen. It loosened under his gaze. In that case, she managed, no regrets here either. He kissed her, slow at first, careful, like a man touching something sacred, then deeper, the taste of storm and earth mingling. Their shared shadow fused completely as their bodies pressed together, the seam between mortal and fae blurring into nothing but warmth and wanting and the quiet, terrifying fact of this is mine, and I chose it. When they finally pulled apart, breathless and laughing a little, the sky had shifted toward dusk. Home, Rissa said again, voice softer. Home, Trevan echoed. They walked on. Far behind them, at the edge of sight, the standing stones glimmered with new purpose. Between two worlds, a corridor waited. And somewhere in Fairy, in a hall full of whispers and glasslight, the Shadow Court realized they had not gained a tether. They had gained a counterpart. A mortal woman with half a Fae Prince's soul, a Fae Prince with calluses on his hands and dirt under his nails, and between them a story that refused to be owned by any realm but their own. The real trouble, as stories like this go, was just beginning. The trouble didn't announce itself this time with thunder. It crept instead, subtle as fog through an open window. The first few weeks after the sealing were peaceful. The moor breathed easy again. Rain fell when it was meant to, crops sprouted without twisting into strange shapes, and the villagers began to greet Trevan with wary smiles instead of crosses made behind their backs. He'd even joined Rissa at market once, though he scowled when she caught him trying to pay for apples with silver leaves. But as winter edged close, small oddities returned. A candle flame would bend toward the window, no wind in the room. Frost would form in patterns that looked like handwriting. Once, Rissa heard a knock at the cottage door in the dead of night, 3 slow taps, measured and deliberate, but when she opened it, there was only fog. Trevan's mood darkened with each strange sign. They're testing the corridor, he said one evening, pacing before the fire. Kale or someone worse. They're sending whispers through it. Rissa sat curled on the hearth rug, watching sparks snap and drift. You built locks, she said. We both did. He stopped pacing. Locks are only strong as the silence around them. Once a name for the door spreads, so does the way to open it. She tilted her head. You mean someone here might? Yes, he said. Mortals love bargains as much as Fae do. There's always someone who wants power enough to pry open what's meant to stay closed. Rissa felt a chill slide through her. Then we need to find them first. He gave her a look that was half affection, half frustration. You make it sound so simple. It's not, she admitted. But I didn't survive your world just to let mine burn from the inside. Trevan's lips quirked. Still terrifying, he said. Still right, she shot back. 2 days later, they found the first evidence. A patch of ground near the old mill where the grass had turned silver overnight, every blade glinting under the weak winter sun. Trevan crouched and pressed his hand to the frost. The air buzzed faintly. Glamour residue, he said. Recent. Fae side origin, mortal activation. Rissa frowned. Meaning someone here called it through. He nodded. And whoever did it, they used your corridor. The realization hit like cold water. Ours? It's the only open crossing left, he said. They couldn't use another if they tried. Rissa stared at the glimmering grass, unease pooling in her stomach. Then this is on us. No, Trevan said sharply. On them. We gave the worlds a bridge, not a weapon. But if someone's twisted it, she began. Then we twist it back, he finished, standing. His eyes were storm-dark again. And we start by finding the one who opened it. They tracked the disturbances across the moor, fields where birds sang in reverse, wells that reflected the wrong sky, a child's laughter echoing from a pond long after the children had gone home. All the signs pointed toward the forest beyond the river. Few villagers went there anymore. They said it was haunted. They weren't wrong. By the time the cottage roofs vanished behind them, the air had changed, heavier, thicker, full of quiet hums that weren't quite sound. Trevan's hair stood on end as if charged. She's close, he murmured. She? Rissa asked. He hesitated. I can feel the glamour. It smells like longing. They followed it to a clearing where the ground shimmered faintly. A woman stood in the center, her cloak of woven ivy glinting with frost. She looked mortal, but the light bent wrong around her, slightly too sharp, slightly too clean. Her eyes, when she turned, were amber and ancient. Rissa's breath caught. You're not from here. The woman smiled faintly. Neither are you anymore, little shadow thief. Trevan stepped forward. Name yourself. I am Lysara of the River Court, she said. Formerly of the House of Thorns. Presently, freelance. You're trespassing, he said. She tilted her head. So are you. Not anymore, he said coldly. I chose exile. And I chose freedom, Lysara replied. You sealed the worlds, Prince, but you left a keyhole, and I found it. Rissa stepped closer, fury sparking under her ribs. You've been dragging power through the corridor. Lysara's smile didn't falter. Borrowing it. Mortals crave miracles. I give them what they ask, healed wounds, fertile soil, a glimpse of beauty they've forgotten. They offer small things in return. Like what? Rissa demanded. The Fae woman's gaze flicked toward her shadow, sharp as a blade. A piece of themselves. A name. A heartbeat. They hardly notice. Trevan's power flared, a flicker of lightning running down his arm. You know what happens when mortals give too much. Lysara's eyes glowed faintly. Do you, exile? You of all Fae lecturing me on the sanctity of balance? Enough, Rissa snapped. You're poisoning both sides. The corridor wasn't built for this. Lysara's voice softened. No, dear. It was built because you couldn't bear to let go. You two turned a wound into a love story. You stitched the realms together with sentiment and called it magic. Don't blame me for walking through the door you left wide open. The words hit too close to truth. Rissa flinched. Trevan stepped in front of her, his voice low and dangerous. You have until sunrise to leave this realm. After that, I come for you. Lysara's gaze slid to Rissa again. And what about her? Half of her still belongs to us. How long before the mortal side withers and she craves the other world again? Longer than you'll live to find out, Trevan said. Lysara's smile turned thin. We'll see. She vanished in a shimmer of light that smelled faintly of river water and crushed lilies. Rissa exhaled shakily. She's not wrong, she whispered. We did leave it open. Trevan turned to her. And we'll close it properly this time. Together. Back at the cottage, they prepared the ritual. It was not like before, no reckless improvisation, no desperate prayer. This was careful, deliberate. Rissa drew sigils in charcoal across the hearthstones while Trevan laid iron nails in a circle. Iron was poison to Fae magic, grounding it, forcing truth from illusion. What if sealing it again locks you out forever? She asked quietly. He paused, meeting her eyes. Then I'll stay here forever. Trevan. He crossed to her, touching her chin lightly. You think I'd trade this? He gestured around, the low beams, the flicker of firelight, the scent of bread she'd baked that morning. I've ruled storms, Rissa. They never loved me back. Something inside her cracked open. You don't get to die sealing it, she whispered fiercely. Not after everything we've done to live. He smiled, tired and luminous. Then help me live properly. Keep me tethered. She swallowed. Always. At midnight, they returned to the standing stones. The wind howled across the moor, carrying whispers from both realms. Trevan's sigils glowed pale against the stones. The corridor pulsed faintly, a thin vein of light beneath the surface. Rissa took his hand. Ready? He nodded. Begin. Together, they spoke the words that would seal the rift, this time not in defiance, but in promise. Each line wove their voices tighter. For what was torn, we mend. For what was lost, we name. No shadow crosses unbidden. No light passes unearned. We are the hinge, the heart, the home. The air convulsed. Light flared, blinding. The world seemed to stretch, then snap. When it cleared, the moor was still again. Rissa opened her eyes, and froze. Trevan was on his knees, hands pressed to the ground, his breath shallow. His hair glowed faintly, and the edges of him blurred, flickering like heat haze. Trevan. She dropped beside him, grabbing his shoulders. Stay with me. He managed a pained smile. Half my power fed the seal, he said. I'm less now. She shook her head. No. No, you're still. I'm still me, he murmured. Just quieter. He lifted her hand to his lips, pressing a kiss to her knuckles. You anchored me. That's enough. She pulled him into her arms, holding him until his breathing steadied. When the dawn came, the corridor's glow had faded to nothing. The standing stones were cold again, inert. And Trevan was mortal enough to leave footprints in the dew. Months passed. Seasons turned. The villagers began calling him the Storm Prince, though most said it half in jest. He fixed their weathered roofs, mended fences, helped Rissa plant rows of herbs that never failed to bloom. Sometimes he still looked toward the horizon when lightning flickered, but he never went to the stones again. Rissa caught him once, late at night, sketching the pattern of their joined shadows into the table wood with the tip of a knife. What are you doing? She asked, amused. Reminding myself, he said softly. That we changed something real. She leaned against him, resting her head on his shoulder. Not just the world. No, he said, smiling faintly. But the world will have to keep up. Outside, the rain began to fall, gentle, clean, and entirely of this realm. And beneath it, two shadows moved as one. The snow melted early that spring. By the first thaw, the moor was a patchwork of new green and shallow pools that caught the sky like spilled mirrors. Rissa had almost convinced herself that peace might last this time, that sealing the corridor and surviving it meant the story had finally learned to rest. She was wrong, of course. The warning came not with lightning or crows this time, but with music. A low, haunting melody drifted across the hills one dusk, as if someone were plucking silver strings far beneath the earth. It wasn't a human tune. The air shimmered faintly when it reached the cottage. Trevan stiffened before the first note finished. That's Fae, Rissa whispered. He nodded slowly, face pale. Older than Kale. Older than any court I know. She stood. Older? He swallowed. It's a summons. To what? He met her eyes. A queen. Rissa's heart sank. I thought you said the courts were leaderless. They are, he said. Except the one they don't speak of. The one that doesn't sit on a throne, because it never fell. He turned toward the window, staring out across the moor where the sound was growing louder. Lysara must have called her. Rissa's voice went dry. Called who? The broken queen. They didn't go to her. She came to them. At dawn, mist rolled across the moor, thick and pale as milk. The world went quiet, no birds, no wind, not even the whisper of grass. When Rissa stepped outside, she saw a shape moving through the fog, tall, slender, crowned not with jewels but shards of mirror that cut the light into 1,000 pieces. The broken queen walked as if gravity were optional. Each step left faint petals of frost in the air. When she spoke, her voice carried a sound like cracking glass. You made a corridor, she said, her words simple, unhurried. You closed it. You sealed yourselves inside your little world of compromise. Trevan stepped forward, head bowed slightly, the gesture halfway between respect and defiance. Your Majesty. Do not name me as though I were one of your old rulers, she said sharply. I was old when Lightningdale was a spark in a storm cloud. Rissa felt the temperature drop. Frost gathered on the edge of her cloak. What do you want? She asked, forcing her voice steady. The queen's gaze turned toward her, and Rissa had to fight the urge to look away. Her eyes were the same fractured silver as the crown, endless reflections of things that weren't there. You are the hinge. The human half of a bridge that refuses to break. I want to know why you built it. Because the world needed it, Rissa said. Because we broke the old one and had to replace it with something that didn't hurt anyone. Lies, said the queen softly. You built it because you loved him. Because you could not bear to lose what you stole. Rissa didn't flinch. Maybe. But the reason doesn't change what it does. It keeps both realms alive. The queen smiled faintly. Alive is not the same as whole. Trevan stepped closer to Rissa. What are you offering, Majesty? A bargain, the queen said simply. I will make your worlds whole again. I will heal the seam entirely. No corridors, no bleed, no risk. Each realm sealed and perfect as before. Rissa frowned. At what cost? The queen looked directly at her. You. Rissa's mouth went dry. Me? You are the mortal infection, the queen said. The tether that keeps him human, the flaw that keeps the worlds entangled. Remove you, and the corridor unravels. Trevan moved instantly, lightning cracking faintly under his skin. No. The queen regarded him with faint amusement. Still protecting your shadow, I see. She's not my shadow, he said through his teeth. She's my equal. The queen's tone didn't change. If you truly believe that, you will let her choose. The world went deathly still. Rissa could hear her heartbeat in her ears. You're saying if I go, if I die, the world survive. The queen's head tilted. Not die. Dissolve. Return to what you were before. A story unmade. A thread pulled clean. Rissa's hands trembled. And if I refuse? Then the corridor decays, the queen said calmly. Fairy drowns in hunger. The mortal world burns under storms it cannot name. Every child born after you will live between worlds and belong to neither. Balance will not wait. Trevan's voice was quiet and deadly. You always offer false choices. I offer truths no one else dares to speak, the queen said. But this one will decide which world deserves to live. They didn't answer her that day. The queen left them with the choice and the frost that lingered long after her figure vanished. That night, the fire wouldn't catch. Trevan sat at the table, staring at his hands, the faint glow of magic beneath his skin dimmer than she'd ever seen it. "She's lying," he said finally. "Or half lying." Rissa folded her arms around herself. "Half lying?" "She said dissolving you would heal the seam," he said. "But she didn't say how." "It's possible she means to use your essence to anchor Fairy instead, to feed it." Rissa shuddered. "So if I say yes, I become fuel?" "Yes." "And if I say no?" He hesitated. "The corridor could rot. Slowly. Centuries maybe. Maybe less." She exhaled. "So either I die now, or everyone dies later." He reached for her hand. "We'll find another way." "How?" she whispered. "You're not Fae enough anymore. I'm not human enough. Every time we fix one thing, something else breaks." Trevan's eyes flashed. "Then we break her instead." They spent the next 3 days preparing. Rissa gathered iron filings, salt, and charcoal. Trevan redrew the old sigils, stronger and sharper this time, carved into oak boards he set around the cottage like wards. They slept in snatches, rarely speaking, their silence thick with what neither dared to say aloud, that this might not work, and that if it failed, there would be no coming back. On the 4th night, the frost returned. The queen didn't knock. She simply appeared, the air bending around her like glass. "You've had your time," she said. "Have you chosen?" Rissa stepped forward. "Yes. But not what you expected." Trevan rose behind her, lightning flickering faintly under his palms. The queen smiled. "You plan to fight me?" "No," Rissa said. "To end you." She threw the iron dust. It hit like ash and fire. The queen staggered back, her reflection fracturing into a dozen mirrored selves. Trevan shouted an incantation, his power surging through the sigils on the floor. The air cracked open in a web of lightning. "Bind her to truth," he shouted. Rissa stepped into the circle, blood running down her wrist where she'd cut it earlier to power the spell. The iron and salt hissed, the air filling with the scent of ozone and earth. The queen's laughter echoed through the chaos. "You think mortal tricks and exile sparks can bind me?" Rissa met her gaze. "No. But love can." She reached for Trevan's hand. Their joined shadows flared white-hot, brighter than sunlight. The circle exploded outward, consuming everything in a ring of searing brilliance. The queen screamed, a sound of 1,000 mirrors breaking. When the light faded, the moor was silent. The frost was gone. The air felt lighter, warmer. The standing stones stood cracked but stable, humming softly. Trevan collapsed to one knee, panting. "Rissa?" She turned to him, whole, glowing faintly with the same stormlight that had once been his alone. "She's gone," she said quietly. Her power folded into the seal. "It's done." Trevan stared at her. "You took it." "Borrowed it," she said. "Enough to fix what she broke." He laughed weakly, disbelief and awe tangled in his voice. "You're going to terrify every court in existence." "Good," Rissa said. "They'll stop underestimating mortals." Months later, when the world had finally learned calm again, they built a new marker near the standing stones, a simple carved slab of granite that read for the worlds that chose to meet, not devour. Sometimes travelers came to leave offerings. Coins, poems, trinkets. None knew the full story. Only whispers remained, of a woman who loved a storm and a storm that learned to stay. One evening, as sunset spilled across the moor, Trevan joined her by the marker. "You still glow, you know," he said lightly. She smiled. "You always did." He laughed quietly. "I'm mortal now. Then we're both something new." He reached for her hand. "Rissa Lightningdale," he said softly. "Queen between, breaker of bargains, terror of Fae and men alike." She arched a brow. "You forgot wife." His grin was small and unguarded. "Never." They stood together as the first stars bloomed overhead, the air humming softly with distant magic, quiet, patient, alive. The worlds were not perfect. But they were theirs. And for the first time in any realm, love was enough to hold the balance. The end. Thank you so much for listening. Tell me in the comments if you want to hear more Fae stories like this.